My ex-fiancée's vengeful sister tried to sabotage my business after I called off the wedding, but it backfired spectacularly, leaving her family in financial ruin. My relationship with Sarah started like a whirlwind romance you read about in novels. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, and there was an instant spark. I was drawn to her wit, her infectious laugh, and the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She told me later, was captivated by my ambition and my somewhat quirky sense of humor. We were inseparable from that day on, spending every waking moment together, talking late into the night, dreaming about our future. We moved in together after 6 months, a decision that felt both impulsive and entirely natural. Our apartment quickly became a sanctuary, filled with shared memories, inside jokes, and the comforting routine of our lives intertwining. We cooked together, went on impromptu road trips, and even started a small, absurd collection of novelty socks. Life with Sarah was vibrant, exciting, and full of promise. Her family, however, was a different story, especially her older sister, Rebecca. From the very beginning, Rebecca seemed to have an issue with me. She was always critical, always finding fault, always subtly undermining me in front of Sarah and their parents. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to an older sister's protectiveness, but it went beyond that. It was a thinly veiled disdain, a sense of superiority that permeated every interaction. Rebecca was, to put it mildly, a force of nature, a loud, opinionated, and incredibly self-centered individual who thrived on being the center of attention. She had a successful career in corporate law, a high-flying partner, and a lifestyle that she constantly flaunted. She seemed to view Sarah's choice in me, a budding entrepreneur trying to establish a specialized artisan bakery, as a personal affront to her family's perceived social standing. Our engagement, 2 years into our relationship, was met with a lukewarm reception from Rebecca. While Sarah's parents were genuinely happy for us, Rebecca barely offered a congratulations, instead making a snide remark about whether I could afford a proper wedding. Sarah, bless her heart, always tried to mediate, always tried to make excuses for her sister's behavior, but it was clear that the tension was wearing on her. I, too, found myself growing increasingly uncomfortable in Rebecca's presence. Every family gathering became a gauntlet of subtle insults and thinly veiled criticisms directed my way. The wedding planning began, and with it, Rebecca's interference escalated. She had an opinion on everything: the venue, the caterer, Sarah's dress, even the font on the invitations. Her suggestions were rarely helpful and often designed to undermine Sarah's choices or to subtly push for something more extravagant, more in line with her own tastes. Sarah, wanting to keep the peace, often caved, which led to numerous disagreements between us. I wanted our wedding to be a reflection of our love, our shared vision, but it was slowly becoming Rebecca's show. The breaking point came during a particularly heated discussion about the guest list. Rebecca had unilaterally decided to invite several of her own high-profile colleagues and clients, people neither Sarah nor I had ever met, insisting it would be good for our networking. When I gently pushed back, stating that we wanted a more intimate affair, she launched into a tirade. She accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, and not good enough for her sister. She made a cruel jab at my business, implying it was a hobby rather than a serious venture, and suggested I was only marrying Sarah for her family's perceived wealth, a completely baseless and offensive accusation. That night, after Rebecca had stormed out, I had a long, painful conversation with Sarah. I confessed how much Rebecca's constant negativity was affecting me, how it was tainting what should be the happiest time of our lives. I told her that I couldn't marry into a family where I felt so disrespected and belittled by a core member. Sarah, to her credit, was devastated but understood. She had seen the writing on the wall too, the cumulative effect of Rebecca's behavior. It was an incredibly difficult decision, one that broke both our hearts, but ultimately, we agreed to call off the wedding. The love was still there, but the toxicity of Rebecca's presence had become an insurmountable barrier. The fallout was immediate and explosive. Sarah's parents, while sad, were understanding, acknowledging that Rebecca had been out of line. Rebecca, however, reacted with incandescent fury. She saw my decision to call off the wedding as a personal insult, a public humiliation that reflected poorly on her and her family. She called me every name in the book, accused me of using Sarah, and vowed to make me regret my decision. I tried to ignore her, to move on with my life and focus on my business, but Rebecca was not one to let go easily. My artisan bakery, the Golden Crust, was my passion project. I had poured my life savings, countless hours, and every ounce of my creativity into it. We specialized in unique sourdough breads, custom-designed celebration cakes, and exquisite pastries. all made with locally sourced, organic ingredients. We had built up a loyal customer base, and our reputation for quality and innovation was growing. We were on the cusp of expanding, having just secured a lease on a second, larger location in a more bustling part of the city. One morning, about 2 months after the engagement was called off, I started noticing strange things. Negative reviews began appearing online, not just on our Google page, but on niche food blogs and local community forums. These weren't just standard complaints, they were vicious, unfounded attacks, accusing us of using stale ingredients, having unsanitary conditions, and even claiming we were overcharging for substandard products. They were clearly coordinated, appearing within hours of each other, all echoing similar false narratives. Then came the cancellations. Several large catering orders, for which we had already purchased ingredients and dedicated production time, were abruptly withdrawn, with vague excuses about unforeseen circumstances. Our suppliers, normally reliable, started calling with concerns about delayed payments, even though our accounts were always up to date. There was an insidious whisper campaign, a subtle yet persistent effort to tarnish our name in the local business community. Potential investors, who had previously shown keen interest in our expansion plans, suddenly became evasive, citing concerns about market stability or unforeseen internal changes. I felt a cold dread creep into my stomach. This wasn't random bad luck. This was a deliberate, targeted attack. My mind immediately went to Rebecca. Who else would have such a personal vendetta against me and the means to execute such a calculated campaign? I started investigating. I reached out to the individuals who had left the most scathing reviews, only to find that their email addresses bounced or led to defunct social media profiles. The phone numbers associated with the cancelled catering orders were disconnected or belonged to people who had never heard of my bakery. It was a digital ghost hunt, designed to be untraceable. However, Rebecca, for all her cunning, had a fatal flaw: her insatiable need for recognition and her habit of boasting. She had a public profile on a professional networking site, where she often posted about her achievements and strategic successes. One day, while browsing through her posts, a habit I had developed out of morbid curiosity and a need to stay aware of her movements, I saw something that made my blood run cold. She had posted about a challenging new pro bono project she was undertaking, aimed at disrupting unethical business practices in the local food industry, with veiled allusions to a certain pretentious bakery. The timing of this post coincided perfectly with the start of the smear campaign against the Golden Crust. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a massive red flag that I decided to play detective. I enlisted the help of a former college classmate, Liam, who was now a cybersecurity expert. I explained the situation, my suspicions about Rebecca, and the devastating impact it was having on my business. Liam was intrigued, partly by the challenge and partly by the injustice of it all. He began digging, meticulously tracing IP addresses, analyzing metadata from the fake reviews, and scrutinizing online footprints. What Liam uncovered was astonishing and horrifying. Rebecca had not only orchestrated the online smear campaign, but she had also leveraged her legal connections and influence to subtly pressure suppliers, spread rumors amongst potential investors, and even plant negative stories with a local gossip blog, all under the guise of consumer advocacy or due diligence. She had used burner phones, proxy servers, and various shell accounts to conceal her digital tracks, but Liam was good. He found the connections, the subtle patterns, the digital fingerprints that all pointed back to Rebecca and, in some cases, her legal firm's resources. She had been incredibly careful, but not careful enough. There were too many little details, too many overlaps that Liam managed to connect. He found evidence of her paying individuals a small sum to write fake reviews and make fake calls, all funneling through encrypted channels that he painstakingly decrypted. One particular piece of evidence was damning: an email exchange between Rebecca and a former disgruntled employee of a competitor, offering to pay them for insider information that could be used to discredit my bakery. The email, while cleverly worded, explicitly mentioned the Golden Crust and Rebecca's desire to cripple their operations. It was the smoking gun. Armed with this irrefutable evidence, I consulted with a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies. She was appalled by the extent of Rebecca's malice and the deliberate nature of the sabotage. She advised me to gather all the affected parties: the suppliers who had been pressured, the caterers who had cancelled, the investors who had pulled out, and present a united front. This wasn't just about my business anymore. It was about exposing a malicious individual who was using her power and connections to destroy others. We decided to hit Rebecca where it would hurt her most: her professional reputation and her finances. Ms. Davies prepared a comprehensive lawsuit. detailing every instance of corporate sabotage, defamation, and malicious interference. The damages we were seeking were substantial, covering lost revenue, reputational damage, and the costs associated with the disruption to our expansion plans. Before filing the lawsuit, Ms. Davey sent a cease and desist letter outlining the evidence we had gathered and giving Rebecca a chance to retract her actions and offer a settlement. Rebecca's initial response was predictable: denial, outrage, and threats of countersuits. She believed she was untouchable. But then, Ms. Davies delivered the bombshell. She informed Rebecca that not only did we have overwhelming evidence of her direct involvement, but we also had proof that she had used her firm's resources and potentially client information in her campaign against me. This was a massive ethical breach, a professional misconduct that could lead to disbarment and a catastrophic end to her career. The shift in Rebecca's demeanor was immediate. The bluster evaporated, replaced by a panicked desperation. She knew she was caught. Her professional life, which was the cornerstone of her identity and self-worth, was hanging by a thread. The thought of losing her law license, her prestigious career, and her social standing was clearly terrifying to her. She tried to negotiate, to minimize her involvement, to offer a paltry settlement. But we held firm. Ms. Davies made it clear that we were prepared to go to court and expose her entire scheme, including the use of her firm's resources, if she didn't agree to our terms. The settlement was brutal for Rebecca. She had to issue a public apology, retract all false statements, and pay a significant sum in damages, enough to cover all my losses and even fund the expansion of the Golden Crust with a substantial cushion. The amount was so large that it required her to sell off some of her considerable assets, including a luxury car and a vacation home she frequently flaunted. But the biggest blow to Rebecca wasn't just financial. The revelation of her malicious actions leaked within her professional circles, and the ethical committee of her bar association launched an investigation. The damage to her reputation was irreparable. Her law firm, to protect its own image, distanced itself from her, and eventually, she was quietly let go. Her high-flying partner, who was also implicated in some minor ways by association, though not directly involved in the sabotage, eventually left her. Rebecca's carefully constructed world of power and prestige crumbled around her. Her family was devastated. Sarah's parents, though saddened by the turn of events, expressed their support for my decision to protect my business and expose Rebecca. Sarah herself, who had remained in contact with me as a friend, expressed a profound sense of relief, albeit tinged with sadness for her sister's downfall. She told me that seeing Rebecca finally face consequences for her actions, after years of getting away with everything, was a bitter but necessary pill to swallow. The Golden Crust not only survived the attack but thrived. The public apology and the exposure of Rebecca's scheme actually generated a wave of sympathy and support for my bakery. People rallied around us, appreciating our resilience and the quality of our products. Our second location opened with overwhelming success, and we even garnered positive media attention for our story of overcoming adversity. I often reflect on how close Rebecca came to destroying everything I had worked for. Her malice was truly astounding, but her overconfidence and insatiable ego were her undoing. It was a painful and stressful chapter in my life, but ultimately, it taught me valuable lessons about resilience, the importance of fighting for what you believe in, and the true cost of unchecked envy and bitterness. Sarah and I never rekindled our romantic relationship. Too much had changed, too much had been broken. But we remain good friends, a testament to the genuine connection we once shared, a connection that, thankfully, Rebecca couldn't completely destroy. I'm now happily in a new relationship, and my business is flourishing. Rebecca, as far as I know, is working a much lower profile job in a different city, her once glittering career reduced to ashes, a consequence of her own destructive actions. The irony of her family's financial struggles now, after all her snide remarks about my income, is not lost on me.